Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste and good evening. Revered Swami Prapananji Maharaj, dear Swami Ishadhyananji Maharaj. Is this better? Okay. And dear friends, thanks to Maharaj for arranging this talk, giving me this opportunity to come back here to Sacramento again this year. It's always wonderful to come back to this lovely, lovely ashram. And it's got such a spiritual vibration here. And thank you all for turning out in such large numbers on a weekday evening. The subject before us this evening is the harmony of religions. And of course, I'm referring to Sri Ramakrishna's very famous, very well-known teaching that as many faiths, so many paths. In Bengali, it's almost proverbial in Bengal now. Joto mat toto path. This teaching, I would say, when you ask, is this relevant? It is relevant, unfortunately relevant. It shouldn't have been. In this day and age, we should have gone beyond the age of religious violence and warfare and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, that's not so. The very occasion on which we are speaking, it's just 2 days from 9/11. And in New York, 9/11 means it shows us the problem, the question. And the answer is also 9/11, because more than 100 years before that, in the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, Swami Vivekananda spoke on 9/11, and he delivered his message, the message of his master, the message of the harmony of different religions. Ken Wilber has said, he's talking about why so many young Americans are turning away from organized religion. Swami Ishadhyananji was telling me about a new book which is called The Great De-Churching, right? So it's not that young people are not interested in spirituality. They are. But there's something that's turning them away from organized religion. And so Ken Wilber says that if in the 21st century, religions, if they want to retain young people, they have to do 3 things. The first is they have to stop fighting among each other. So that's first. And then 2 more. One is that they must bring themselves into, at least have no conflict with science, which is what is established science. At least don't go against that. And third, he said, is that religions must update themselves to modern values, regarding race and ecology and gender and all of that. So these are some areas in which young people today, they find it very difficult to accept or to feel that they belong. They find a clash of values. One of the important problems is interfaith violence. Why is there violence between religions? It goes back to our tribal instincts, one feels. In pre-civilizational times, when we were nomadic tribes, when one tribe came across the other tribe, the usual result would be violence. One tribe would try to wipe out the other tribe. And this continued. When organized religions developed, one of the things that the founders of these religions tried to do was to overcome violence, by uniting people. So in fact, one of the meanings of the Latin root of the word religion is to unite. So bringing people together. The way it worked was this. if your tribal instincts lead to violence, I belong to this group and the others, they are other, they don't belong to us, and then there's violence. Why not think of all of us belonging to the same tribe? So a religion, an ideology, the one God that we worship. So all of you gathered together, belonging to different tribes, now you feel you belong to the same tribe. And therefore there is no need to fight. The kind of protection and the rights, privileges that people enjoyed within one tribe, that was now extended across all the tribes because they subscribed to a super tribe, the tribe of one religion. But you can see the seeds of violence are right there. The moment you say we all belong to this one super tribe, this tribe of this particular religion, then what about those who do not belong to our religion, who belong to some other religion? They belong to another tribe. And so now they become the other. That which was tribal violence now became inter-religious violence. To some extent, at least, this analysis is correct. With one exception, India. What the Indian experience was, that we will look at, and then we will situate Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and see how it is a solution to this problem. Remember, what we're going to talk about is violence directed for religious reasons by people belonging to one religion against people belonging to another religion, for religious reasons, because there's violence for political reasons, economic reasons, military reasons, and a host of other things. And those things will not cease so easily. So in the 20th century, for example, probably the most violent century that we have had in human history, most of the wars and most of the killing was not for religion. There have been religious wars earlier, but most of the wars and most of the violence in the 20th century were actually by secular forces. The Nazis against the others and the forces of nationalism in the First World War and so on. Or the whole Cold War between capitalism and communism. Mostly it was non-religious, but still very violent. And that kind of violence, we are not going to talk about that now. We're going to talk about the problem of interfaith conflict and how harmony between religions can be established. The unique teachings and extraordinary insights of Sri Ramakrishna. I had an experience. Just a few weeks ago, I was in London, and my hosts very kindly took me to St. Paul's Cathedral. It's a wonderful experience, and I was with a group of Indian people, devotees of the ashram who were showing me around. Magnificent, magnificent. I mean, that's the Church of England, the Anglican Church, and it embodies the Protestant revolt against the Catholics. So, as they explain it, this was to be a cathedral of the letter, of the word, not of icons. It is something directed against the Catholics. So, and so on. What I noticed also was, in that midst of that opulence and magnificence, many tattered old flags hanging from the ceilings. What were they? The flags of different regiments of the British Army, who have fought in different wars across the world and won the battles, and heroism and inspired by God. Then we went to the crypt below the church, and it's a very popular place for tourists. And they were showing me, this is so amazing. This is the tomb of the Duke of Wellington, who defeated Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. And I said to a group of people, among them there were Indians, I said, yes, it's amazing, but think what this place represents. And this place represents an amazing, extraordinary amalgamation of war and religion and politics, all put together in deadly synchronicity. I said, from an Englishman's perspective, they might be proud of it, and they would have some reasons to be proud of it. On the other hand, if you're an Indian, we are standing next to the tomb of the Duke of Wellington, who must have been outraged. I said, listen, the Duke of Wellington is, who he was? He was Lord Arthur Wellesley. He was the one who defeated Tipu Sultan and killed Tipu Sultan in India, made the first series of major victories for the East India Company, which enabled more than 200 years of British rule there. If you are an Indian, from an Indian perspective, this entire institution is a finely honed dagger pointed at your throat. It's true. It's true. And you shouldn't forget it. I said, did you see all those flags in the hall upstairs throughout the chapel? What do they represent? They represent war on a global scale across the world, fought by imperialist forces, by the British Army, in service of the British Empire. Yes, again, from a British perspective, English perspective, I can see how this is heroism. But not from your perspective, not from the African's perspective, not even from the American's perspective. So I sometimes used to think, how could this little country, England, rule over half the world and a vast country like India? And when I see that institution, I said to them, when I see this institution, now I think, how could they not? When all the forces of a nation are brought together, war, God, politics, all together, nationalism, all together, in one weapon. So yes, I was just thinking, Vivekananda saw all this. When he went through England and he came to the United States, he saw, and this is not just England, by the way. It's not that I'm just criticizing England. All of Europe was this, all of Europe. He saw all this, and I also noticed that Vivekananda learned so many amazing things from the West, from America, from Europe, and he took it back and he told his countrymen about this. He never spoke about this combining religion and militarism and government. No, he saw this. He didn't think it's something good, that it's something worth emulating. No. Those who are from India here, can you think of a single Indian religious institution, a single temple, it's land of temples, where you would find flags of the armies and the names of generals and warriors and admirals and captains? No. I often say India was not a particularly peaceful place. There were emperors and kings and kingdoms and empires rising and falling, wars galore across the millennia. But never once were there wars driven by religious enmity. Never. India has always been a land of tremendous religiosity. There's a land crazy about religion. And how strange, this most religious of cultures has no religious warfare. Warfare there was, as I said, we're talking about the problems created by religion. There's no religious warfare. So this is a remarkable thing which we need to think about. And it's something that makes it relevant to this day and age, this day of the two 9/11s. The 9/11 problem, of the ancient problem of religious hatred and violence, and the answer provided by the other 9/11, when Vivekananda gave this message of harmony of religions. In fact, we were introduced to violence in the name of religion, organized violence in the name of religion by the first waves of Islamic invaders and then by Christian colonialists. In fact, Vivekananda, when he was giving his speech in Chicago in the Parliament of World Religions, he spoke about how India has sheltered the persecuted of all nations. And he mentioned how the Jews, when their temple was destroyed in 72 AD, they came to the south of India and they sheltered, and even till today there's a small but vibrant Jewish community. I remember in New York, we were celebrating in the Indian consulate in New York, Hanukkah and Diwali, the Jewish festival of lights and the Hindu festival of lights together. And the Jewish and the Israeli consul general had come to give a talk. He said, as the consul general of Israel in New York, I meet Jewish communities from across the world, and they always have their tale of woe, how they're in their country, wherever they lived, they have faced persecution at some time, except India. He said never from the Jewish community from India. They never felt persecuted in India, always felt protected. Vivekananda mentions that. Though, technically speaking, you might be shocked and disappointed. That's not true. The Jews were persecuted in India. How? It's when, after nearly 2,000 years, 1,600 years of peaceful existence in India, when the first Portuguese missionaries came, the Jesuit priests, and they brought the Inquisition from Europe to India, and they tortured and murdered Hindus, Muslims, Jews, and other Christians whom they felt had deviated from the Catholic faith, and so on. So, but the point was, Indians never, persecuted the Jews. The Parsis, the Zoroastrians, when they came from Persia and then settled down in India, and so on. And Vivekananda today would have pointed to the Tibetan Buddhists, for example. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the entire Tibetan Buddhist community established and very respected, flourishing in India. So what is it that enabled India to have this harmony between religions not for centuries, for millennia altogether? I remember a good friend of ours, Rabbi, he is a rabbi from Jerusalem, very engaged in interfaith work. So he came to visit India, and I was asked to show him around our main monastery. We're talking about interfaith harmony, and then he said to me, I hear a lot about interfaith harmony here in India, but where are the seminars and the conferences and the declarations and the meetings of different I don't see any of that happening. And yeah, I can see some of the Indians smiling in this audience. I said, you're right, because India doesn't need it. The idea of the harmony of religions, it's not something decided upon by a few leaders of religions. It's something in the blood of the people. It's something as a part of the culture of the country, and an amazing feat of social engineering. Now that I come out of India and look back upon it, we took it for granted in India. But when I come out of India and look back upon it, I'd say it's an amazing feat of social engineering. The Rig Veda, the oldest of the Indian spiritual scriptures, the basis of Hinduism, the 4 Vedas. In the Rig Veda itself, it says the famous line, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, the wise speak of it differently. Robert Wright, who is a neo-Darwinian, and he's written this book, The Evolution of God. And of course, he doesn't mean that God evolves, but what he means is the conception of God evolves in different religions. The religions themselves evolve. And the book is about Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and how they have evolved through the centuries. Now, towards the end of the book, he has a section on violence between religions. And he says that the ancient Indians, so the book is not about Hinduism. He says the ancient Indians discovered a formula which ensured peace in the religious, interfaith peace in the subcontinent for centuries. And they called it, the truth is one, the wise speak of it differently. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. And from that time onwards, and this is echoed again and again throughout the history of Hinduism, it's not that the religion's various teachers, sects did not vie for supremacy. They did. But what happened was, they did it at a philosophical level. The ancient Indians, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Jains, and there were numerous other sects and religions, they developed a system of debate. So one of the safety mechanisms was highly trained experts. So experts in Hindu philosophies, experts in the Buddhist philosophies, Jaina philosophies, and they would be in conflict with each other, but they would engage in very sophisticated debates. And it led, I don't know who won, each side claims that they won. We always, as Vedantists, we talk about how Shankara defeated the Buddhists. There are actually stories from the Buddhist texts which talk about how there was a great Hindu Pandit called Shankara who was defeated by the Buddhists. So, depending on your source, you don't know who won, but I'll tell you who won. Indian philosophy won. One of the golden period of development of Indian philosophy was the nearly 1,000-year debate between the Hindu schools and the Buddhists. On one side were the Buddhists, on the other side were schools like the Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa. Vedanta is a sort of Johnny-come-lately. But tremendous debate for nearly 1,000 years. And what were they debating? Primarily, look, the Hindus they believe in God, Ishvara, and they believe in the self, an immortal soul. And the Buddhists said that there's no God, and there is no immortal soul. So Atma doctrine, Anatma doctrine. And then the debate spilled over to epistemology, it spilled over to logic, and so on. And it developed. Each side attacked the other side refuted, counter-refutations, and the sophistication of thinking developed. So by the end of the first millennium, Nalanda University was at its heyday, and so many extraordinary texts which form the basis of, for example, Tibetan Buddhism today. His Holiness says, our entire tradition is the Nalanda tradition of India. When we come back to India from Tibet, we are just returning to you what you have given us. I asked a professor at Harvard University, from whom I was studying Madhyamaka Buddhism of Tibet, why is the Tibetan script so much like Old Bengali? It reminds me of Old Bengali. And he said, you know what? He said, because a Bengali invented it. The Bengali monk Atisha Dipankara, he traveled from India to Tibet by the time Nalanda University was declining and transferred texts, and he found the Tibetans did not have a formal script, and he invented an entire script for the Tibetan culture, which continues down with modifications till today. So this was a tremendous development of philosophy. But still, note, it wasn't exactly entirely harmonious. Each school claimed that we have a better grasp on the truth, or the truth, and your understanding of it is wrong, but we will prove it to you not by violence, not by cutting off your heads, or by or by warfare, but by debate. Let's debate, and there are rules of debate, and there are some such famous debates in Indian history. And this was a kind of safety mechanism, I would say, instead of resorting to violence, outright violence. Before I go into the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and their significance, let me just say one solution to the problem of interfaith conflict is modern secular society. You see, if you have religious societies, then religious persecution is almost a given. But if you have, for example, societies like the United States here, or modern democracies across the world, which are secular, in that case, the idea is you are free to pursue your own religion and teach and promote your own religion, but you will not try to oppress or intimidate or use violence on other people. You must obey the law of the land. The law of the land is the law of the land. And this actually has attenuated and prevented a lot of interfaith, interreligious conflict, I think, over the last 200 years or so since secular states have come into being. But here's the problem. It's not a good solution. Why is it not a good solution? Karl Popper, who was a well-known philosopher, he has this what is called the paradox of tolerance. He says that inevitably modern societies, that means he means modern Western societies, will have to face this. The more liberal and tolerant you are, what do you do with the intolerant? So will you tolerate the intolerant, or will you be intolerant with the intolerant? Because if your principle is tolerance, then you have to violate your own principle if you become intolerant with some group of people, intolerant. And it's a difficult question. Even I don't know the answer to this today. But what he says is this: what will happen is that if you are tolerant with the intolerant will come to dominate your society, and it will provoke a reaction from people who were hitherto tolerant. And then intolerant will spread across society. He says a determined, intolerant minority will always win over a disunited but liberal majority. He says this. And then he says, what should be done? Well, of course, first you will have to use reason to persuade people of the benefits of coexistence and tolerance and acceptance. But then he says, this will also not work, because the very characteristic of the intolerant is they are not willing to listen to reason. And they will not let their followers listen to your reason. They will not let their followers attend your talks or read your books. No. Then what will you do? His answer is, I don't know if you will agree with it, even I don't know whether it's true, whether it is desirable or not. His answer is, at that point you have to answer force with force. You will have to use force to maintain tolerance in your society. Why I don't, it's not that I disagree with it, it's just that I'm a little uneasy about it. Why I'm a little uneasy about it is this. When I decide that you are intolerant and I have to control you, where do you draw the line? I might find a particular religion intolerant and seems clearly intolerant. And then, when I've excluded them, then I look at my own religion, I will find some people, I think they're intolerant and I'm more tolerant. Then those people will become the target of my controlling, you know. I mean, that's my thinking. I'm thinking out aloud. One state that I think so far has done a good job along these lines is Singapore. I was joking there. That's the only country in the world where the harmony of religions is required by law. You cannot criticize or attack other religions in any way. And then you will attract the attention of the police. I don't know if it's actually there's a law against it, but there is definitely a strong government policy to maintain the harmony between the different religions in that city-state. Anyway, now, so putting the secular solution aside for the time being, what is the unique thing about Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and how does it apply to us? So here goes. Sri Ramakrishna, he, somebody described him as a glutton for God. So wherever there was talk of God, a teaching about God, he would be interested. He would take me to how, I want to see how the Brahmos are talking about God, how they worship God. Take me to the church. You remember Calcutta was the capital of the British Empire at that time. So there were churches established by the English then. Take me to a church. I want to see how the Christians worship God. And then he practiced in various forms in Hinduism. Of course, his first approach was through worship of the Divine Mother Kali, who was his Ishta. But he also practiced Vaishnava devotion. He also practiced the non-dual Vedantic path, and each path he reached the same goal. And then he practiced a form of Islamic mysticism, a form of Christian mysticism, and in all those paths he reached the same goal, the same realization. And then came his conclusion, based not on hermeneutics, based not on logic and debate, but on direct mystical experience. And his conclusion was, as many faiths, so many paths. In Bengali, Joto Mat, Toto Path. He saw that people, genuinely serious, sincere spiritual seekers and advanced spiritual masters, even they were not liberal. That he noticed. It's not that, throughout the ages, in different religions across the world, there have been great sages. And you will find some of them seem to be, to us today, they seem to be pretty narrow. That we have the right path and everything else is false. And who's saying this? Not an ordinary fanatic, but somebody we all respect. Some the sages, saints in different religions. So you could be a saint, but you could also be quite narrow and illiberal. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna noticed. And so he set about, whenever he would go to different spiritual masters, he listened to them, and he would always encourage people along their own lines of spiritual development. He would say that, yes, this is very good, and follow this, and you will realize God. However, this he would always add, do not think that this is the only way. Do not preach that this is the only way, and everybody has to come to that. No. One can realize God through other ways too. So what is this teaching? One way of understanding, it's very sophisticated. It's, as the Americans would say, it's pretty cool. One way of looking at this is you can analyze it into 5 components, and that's the way I will talk about it for the next few minutes. First of all, Sri Ramakrishna says the ultimate reality, God, Brahman, Shiva, Allah, the Buddha nature, the Tao, whatever you call it, the ultimate reality is infinite, is limitless. One thing he disliked intensely was any attempt to limit the nature of God. See, who are you to limit the nature of God? Who are you to dictate to God what God can be and what God cannot be? Of course, he can say this because it's pretty easy to say this in Hinduism. Sometimes I'm asked to give classes, school children, introducing them to Hinduism. And I put it this way. Hinduism is tremendously diverse, tremendously so. Any question that you ask in Hinduism, the answer is always yes and no. Do Hindus believe in God? Yes and no. There are Hindu, not the same Hindu, so there are Hindu schools which do not believe. Sankhya, for example, does not talk about God. Purva Mimamsa, a Vedic, Orthodox Vedic school, does not talk about or does not focus on God as such, and so on. Is God male? Important question here. Is God male? Yes and no. God is very proudly female. And the worship of the Divine Mother, the Mother Goddess, is as ancient as Hinduism, maybe even older than the worship of God in the male form. And God is beyond male and female gender. We'd be very happy in today's multi-gendered world. Yeah. The Hindus know about the Ardhanarishwaran. Can you worship God as with an elephant head and a pot belly? Yes, you can. As Ganesha. I saw Ganesha was very popular in the United States when I came here. I thought that would be the last deity to be popular. And I asked an American, why is Ganesha popular here? And he said, who doesn't like a cute elephant? So, in all these ways, a tremendous diversity in Hinduism. And Sri Ramakrishna says that God is infinite. And he would teach with these wonderful parables. And I can assure you that tonight when you leave, you may not remember all this theology and all of this interfaith harmony, but you will go away with those parables, those stories. The stories are unforgettable. He says there was a little ant who came upon a mountain of sugar. And he was delighted. Wow, a mountain of sugar. And then the ant went up to the mountain of sugar, with great difficulty took one grain and dragged it back to its little home, its little hole, and looked back and said, I'm coming back for the rest of it. Of course he cannot, and he need not. That little grain of sugar is enough to fill its little tummy, right? And we are exactly like that. God is like that mountain of sugar, we are like that little ant. We cannot comprehend all of it, nor do we need to. Nor do we need to. Our fulfillment, our freedom, our moksha, our nirvana, any one of those aspects which God is pleased to reveal to us is enough for us, is more than enough for us. Infinite, and also Sri Ramakrishna says, God is beyond thought and beyond language. Our thinking and our language cannot grasp God. This is an old Vedantic idea. Avang manasagochara. Beyond thought, beyond language. Why it's beyond language, there's a lot of discussion about it. Basically, in 2 senses. One is from the Advaitic or the Buddhistic sense, the ultimate reality. Buddhists, of course, will not say God. I can't resist this. There's this lovely little joke about Buddhism. You know, a poet said that modern man, the modern human being, we have a God-shaped hole in our psyche in the 20th century because of atheism, agnosticism, giving up of religion, walking away from religion. You can walk away from religion, but you will have a deep sense of lack within you. And the poet said, a God-shaped hole. We have a God-shaped hole in our psyche. And then somebody quipped that the Buddhists replaced the God-shaped hole with a hole-shaped God. Shunya, the void, emptiness, zero. So they would say, and Advaita Vedanta also would say, the ultimate reality is beyond language because language will not work there. What language can do, it can work on this world and can grasp this world, but an attributeless reality beyond our thought, language cannot denote it. So you cannot express the Brahman or the Buddha nature by language. So it's what's called ineffable. Ineffable means beyond a linguistic transaction. Another reason why language cannot touch it is, of course, because of its very infinite nature. Language cannot encompass it. Sri Ramakrishna uses another parable to talk about this. He says, this is difficult to translate into English. In Bengali, and many Indians will get it immediately. Bengalis and other Indians also we have this concept of being defiled by the tongue. Bengali, it's eto, in Hindi, it's juta. So the basic idea is that if you have started eating something, you've touched it with your tongue, you cannot offer it to anybody else. So literally you can't share the same piece of food. You can't. That's not considered good. You can eat yourself, but not to others. And certainly you cannot offer it to God. So immediately the counter-examples come to mind. We all know Shabari in the Ramayana. But that's taken as an extraordinary height of devotion. So where you overcome all taboos because of your love of God. Anyway, so he says that everything has been defiled by the tongue. He makes a play on that. The tongue does two things, eat and speak. So everything has been defiled by the tongue, except Brahman, the ultimate reality. That means everything has been touched by the tongue. But the Brahman is the only thing that has not been defiled by the tongue. That means it has not been spoken. It cannot be spoken by language. That which cannot be expressed by language, our problem is we have only language. What are the scriptures of the world? What are the Vedas and Vedanta and Upanishads, Gita? All of them are language. They are words. And they're trying to express something that cannot be expressed by language. Now what do you do? Well, there are ways. For example, this is not relevant here, but for example, if you cannot say what the ultimate reality is, we can at least say what it is not. So, neti, it's not this, it's not that. That's one way. It's called the apophatic method, the negative, the via negativa. Or you can use contradictory language on purpose. It's further than the farthest, it's nearer than the nearest, it moves not. What is night to the yogi is day to the ordinary person. What is night to the ordinary person is day to the yogi. It sounds contradictory to see action in inaction and inaction in action. Bhagavad Gita. Why this contradictory language? Because what language cannot talk about, through this contradictory language, something is pointed out, which you have to grasp. All right. But what Sri Ramakrishna said was that language does not work, but you have to use language, and therefore you can use different words to point to that same reality. So, and then he gives his famous example. In Bengal, it's a land of ponds, not huge lakes like Canada, but little ponds in villages. They're called pukur, ponds in villages. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, everybody goes to that pukur for water. The Hindu goes there and he takes the water and he calls it jal, which is a Bengali word for water. The Muslim goes there and takes the water and he calls it pani. The Englishman goes there and he takes the water and calls it aqua. No, I don't know any Englishman calling it aqua. Is the word for water in Spanish, is it aqua? Aqua. Yes, aqua. Because I saw a little kid in Central Park. We were walking, and this little kid was talking to its parents and pointing to the lake and saying, agua, agua. Then I realized, oh, the Sri Ramakrishna said this, that somebody. Now, Sri Ramakrishna says all of them are referring to the same reality. Whether you call it water or jal or pani or aqua, you are all referring to the same reality. In the same way, the Hindus may call it Brahman or Shiva or Kali. The Christians may call it Father in heaven. Muslims may call it Allah. You're all talking about the same reality. So different words are used to express the same reality. So these are some of the pieces in Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. You'll see it'll all come together into a wonderful structure for the harmony of religions. Now, an infinite reality which cannot be expressed in words, but when you do try to express it in words, you will use different words, and you're talking about the same reality, not that one of the words is right and other words are wrong. He is echoing the most ancient teaching of the Hindus. Truth is one, the wise speak of it differently. Next step, the next component in Sri Ramakrishna's whole strategy. He says, what is the purpose of these religions? What is the purpose of these religions? He says the goal of human life is God realization. So there is this infinite reality, and it is beyond language, and different words can be used to express it. But the goal of your life is to realize that reality. That's the purpose of human life. And then what are these religions? That's the purpose of these religions also. The purpose of all religions is God realization. You can use different language to talk about it. You can call it nirvana, you can call it, ancient Indian philosophy has many words for it. Nirvana, moksha, mukti, apavarga, kaivalya. So many words are there. And this is what they did. Didn't have much work, I think. They kept on. And you can call it salvation, you can call it whatever you want. But that is the goal of human life, and that's the goal of all the religions. And Sri Ramakrishna had another cute little parable here. He said, you've gone to a mango orchard. Now, there your goal is to go and take the mangoes and eat it and enjoy it. The delicious mangoes. Will you spend your time counting the leaves? No, you shouldn't do that. And then he says, the whole point of religion is God realization. Eat that and let your lives be fulfilled. The rest, this is right, that's wrong, we should pray in this way, we should not pray in that way. All that is leaf counting. So, the goal of life is God realization, and the goal of religions is also God realization. You might say these are simplistic things, but if you ask, I've seen it. I was at the Harvard Divinity School, you talk to divinity students and teachers. What's the goal of religion? It will lead to a big debate. Is the goal of religion to unite everybody else and to fight against somebody else? So no, the goal of religion is to eat the mango, is to realize God. That's the central goal of religion. There are many other aspects of religion. Nobody's denying that. But the central thing is this. And often this is not said enough. This is not said enough. I noticed it's not just the Harvard Divinity School, and across the divinity schools and across religious departments. And you will see, if you sit and listen to the classes, you will begin to feel the goal of religion is politics, or the goal of religion is how to prevent global warming, or the goal of religion is gender equality. Now, all of these are good things, but they are not central to spirituality. And there's no wonder, I have seen in many times, people sign up for these courses, they come for, especially young people, they come with a spiritual hunger, and they leave disappointed. Because what is central is not being talked about anymore. Anyway, that's an aside. So then the third one, if the goal is to realize God, why so many? And why so different? That's the next question. And Sri Ramakrishna now brings in the third component of this whole picture. He says, these religions, different religions, are different paths to that goal of God realization. They're different paths. So, you need not quarrel about them. The paths, by definition, if they're different paths, they have to be different. Sometimes people accuse us, monks of the Ramakrishna order, of saying that you all teach something nonsense that all religions are the same. We have never taught such stuff that all religions are the same. Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda clearly said religions are different. The very fact that different paths means they're different. You wouldn't have different paths if they were not different. And it's good that they're different. And so there are various paths, and they all lead to the same goal. Sri Ramakrishna said they all lead to the same goal. He gave a number of examples. He repeated this teaching again and again. He said, reaching the roof of the house. You can take the staircase and reach the roof of the house. You can take, this was before elevators. You can take the wooden staircase and reach the roof of the house. You can climb up with a bamboo ladder or a rope and reach the roof of the house, but you will all reach the roof of the house. And he said to some devotees who were visiting him, let's see, some of you have walked here. Some of you came by horse carriage. Some of you crossed the river by boat. Some came across the bridge, but you all got here ultimately. Similarly, all those, the Vaishnavas, the Shaivas, the worshippers of Kali, and the Christians and the Muslims, he said the Brahmos, all of them will reach God. If you are sincere and seek Him sincerely, you will reach God. They're like different paths up the same mountain. This is one more example, though I don't think Sri Ramakrishna ever used that particular example. Why I'm bringing it up is another little bit of weirdness I've come across here. You would think all of this is a good idea. You'd be surprised how many people resist it, how many people don't like it. I am right, you are wrong, or one religion is right, everything else is wrong, and somehow that one religion turns out to be mine. Surprise, surprise. And so, these are sophisticated theologians. And you know what their response is? Yes, they are paths of the mountain, but they're different mountains. I said, really? Explain this a little more to me. Why different mountains? You know what? Nobody has been able to, they sort of become shifty-eyed and they move away. They don't give a clear answer why different mountains. The reason there's different mountains, my thinking, is the same old exclusivist fanatical mischief. Different mountains, then one of those mountains is a real mountain, others are false. And that real mountain happens to be my mountain. The same mischief again. The same narrowness and same hatred. Just a little more clever now. And then Sri Ramakrishna, then the fourth component of this, Sri Ramakrishna seems to take the whole thing back. He says, but you have to stick to one path. So you have all these options, all these. But then what do? Do you worship, do you follow one religion on a particular day of the week? No. You stick to your own path. In Hinduism, this is also an old Hindu idea, it's called Ishta Nishta. How does a Hindu handle the tremendous diversity within Hinduism? Do they worship all forms of God and practice all kinds of practices? Impossible, you can't do that. That will be craziness. So what we do is, we have got something called Ishta Devata, the chosen form of God. So the chosen form of God may come from your guru, from your particular tradition in your family, in your community. It could be your choice. So now you focus your practice on that particular form and that tradition and within Hinduism and those practices. The example Sri Ramakrishna gave, another nice little parable about the well digger. A man was digging for water in a particular place, started digging a well. It's hard work. He found no water after some time. Somebody told him, try there. And he went there and started digging a well. And then he gave up after some time and went to a third place. At the end of the day, he had dug in 6 different places, got shallow holes, no water. If he had continued to dig in the first place, he might have got water. And so, in the same way, one must hold on to one path with sincerity. In Bengali, Sri Ramakrishna said, Mot pot. A particular faith is a path. Mot kichu noy. Kintu ektake dhore thakte hoy. In Bengali he said, it's not that a particular, which path you follow is not all that important, but you must follow something. You must hold on to something. These are grand roads to the ultimate, centuries or millennia old, and many have walked before us. So we just have to follow one of these and reach the destination. And finally, he rounds it up, Sri Ramakrishna. The fifth component is, being devoted to your own ideal, you must respect, learn from, and encourage people in different religions. He himself practiced this very meticulously. He never damaged what is called the bhava, the spiritual attitude of a particular person. If you're growing in this way, he would ask, What appeals to you, the formless or with form? Path of knowledge, path of devotion. Some are meditative, various spiritual attitudes which appeal to different people. He wouldn't try to distort or force somebody from one into another. He would rather encourage that person in their own path and add that be a little broad. Don't think that's the only way. All right, so I've nearly run out of time. I'll summarize the five, or I'll just point out the five components of Sri Ramakrishna's as many faiths, so many paths. One is ultimate reality is infinite, beyond language, and when you try to put it in language, you can have multiple expressions of that. That means many names, many theologies, many philosophies. That's possible. Second component is this infinite is the goal of life. It is the purpose of all the religions, the central purpose of religions. Religion is a bridge between you and that infinite. Third, the different religions exist as different pathways to that ultimate reality. So there's no need to quarrel between pathways. Google Maps gives you something and Apple gives you something else. Good, both will take you there. And one may suit you more than the other depending on where you start. And the fourth component was focus, dedication to one particular path, which is your native tradition. Could be by birth, could be by choice. And fifth is respect for others, protecting the other person's spiritual choices, encouraging them, and being liberal, and also learning from them. There's a new term now, cosmopolitanism. See, exclusivism is, I have the truth, everything else is false. Inclusivism is, you have truth too, you have truth too, but I also have truth, but my truth is greater than yours, and you're all included in me. But that is actually the official position of the Catholic Church now, the Vatican now, that they're moved away from the one true religion and everything else is false. They have moved to now, all religions have truth, but Catholic Christianity has the most, and you're all included. If you're good people, Hindus, Buddhists, or whatever, there's a term, anonymous Christians. You are Christians, you don't know it. Now, that's better than being exclusive. That's so inclusive, that I include you. Yeah. You're not bad guys. You're included in my camp. But I'm the best. So that's the footnote. Then the third one is, no, not that one is the best and includes everybody else. Pluralism. Each is true and valid and beautiful and different. And you don't need to interfere with them. They can all develop in their own ways. But pluralism also has a sense of, separation. You go your way, I go my way. And you are all right, I'm all right. There was a book, I'm okay, you're okay, transactional analysis. One time, a lot of people used to read it. Nowadays, people don't read it. So yes, you're okay, I'm okay too. But then comes the cosmopolitanism. I think that's closest to Sri Ramakrishna's perspective, that pluralism is great. And on top of that, just like in a big city, you have multiple cultures, and you enjoy each other's culture. You enjoy each other's food. We enjoy each other's music and dress, and a fusion also develops. Each culture remains intact, but also develops by interacting with others, and the whole thing is enriched. So, not remaining cold and separate from each other, but you learn and enjoy from other traditions also, and enrich your spiritual life. Okay, on that note, I think I'll wrap it up with a peace chant, and we can go into a short Q&A. The Q&A, I think, will be held here. There's a microphone to my left. Those who want questions, ask questions, you can come here. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. All right, don't be shy. You can come up here. Come. Tell us your name and ask the question. Yes. Is it on? Can you hear? Just speak into it, let's see. No? Yes.
Okay. Namaste, Swamiji. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. My name is Neil. I I've listened to many of your lectures online, so it's a pleasure to, be in your presence. My question is, I am somebody who would say I was an atheist agnostic for maybe 30 years, spiritual but not religious for 5 years, and I think this year I feel like that truth of the harmony of religions has really become apparent to me. And it was actually from something that's not in my faith. It was from seeing, a quote from Dante's Paradise, and he talks about the light of consciousness, and that struck me as all religions are pointing to this truth about the one consciousness. I have been reflecting on it, this year, and I wonder to what extent for Abrahamic religions, without, I think that what you mentioned, the goal is God realization. It's not that the goal is outside of us, and that truth is not evident sometimes in the scriptures. And secondly, you've talked about the 4 yogas many times, and I think with practice of multiple types of yoga, and not just bhakti, which I think is common, that becomes self-evident after you go through those 4 paths. So I don't know if there's a way for people from just a narrow bhakti to attain that, or there needs to be more of a systematic approach beyond bhakti from non-Hindu religions?
I think it's a good question. I think we need to be a little more assertive about teaching the harmony of religions, or about insisting on religious harmony. This is something that I've been feeling more and more. Listen, those who are narrow and fanatical are not shy about it. They'll preach to you, with loud voices. Now, you are talking about harmony and coexistence and acceptance and learning from each other and enriching peace between religions. Why should you be shy about it? So I think we need to insist on this teaching of the harmony of religions. Notice, one reason why people are narrow is, and they're afraid of this, is they feel that somehow they'll be untrue to their religion, or they're watering it down or distorting it some way. But Sri Ramakrishna insists on protecting the unique nature of each religion. He doesn't say that you have to give up or change your religion to... Yes, if some people think that their religion insists, as somebody told me, that one of the important things that religion teaches my religion teaches, is to tell others the errors of their ways and make them, bring them to the true path. I said, is that an important part of religion? He says, yes. Then it's difficult. But as far as possible, as they insist on narrowness and exclusivity, we have to insist on inclusivity in, cosmopolitanism. Yeah. Right.
Thank you so much.
I remember I had this debate on a plane from the East Coast to the West Coast, a long flight. And this gentleman sat to me. He's the leader of a small church in the Midwest. And then we sat and we talked. And he, of course, was very clear that he's right and I'm totally wrong. But as I talked about my point of view and the harmony of religions and all of this, when he left, he got up and he looked at me and he said, "It's a pleasure meeting you, Swami. I know I'm right, but if I did not know that, I would say you are speaking sense." Now that's progress. See, that's progress. His intellect is telling him this is good, actually, what he is saying. All right, please tell.
Pranam Maharaj. I'm actually asking a question that my son asked me, and I was stumped.
Okay, what's his name?
Shiva.
Shiva. How old is he?
He is now 14.
14.
And when he asked this question, he was like 11 or so. So we were just talking about Thakur's sadhana and how he practiced various religions and then reached the same goals. His observation was the first time Sri Ramakrishna did that, it is valid. So this particular path led to that particular truth, goal. But once you have that experience, you cannot not have it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you practice other religions, that is already there, how can you definitively conclude that this other way of practice led to that?
True. That's a very, very intelligent, insightful observation. You've already realized it. It's a fact for you. But Sri Ramakrishna was an extraordinary person. If you look at his life carefully, Vivekananda points out that this ability to completely empty yourself and then pour something else into yourself. He used to say, empty the bucket completely. We usually cannot do that. One path is more than what we can handle in one life. But Sri Ramakrishna is an extraordinary thing. You know, when he practiced Islam, he removed all the pictures of Hindu gods and goddesses from the room. And he dressed like a Muslim. He would throw himself, heart and soul, with frightening intensity into that. So, and take his path up from that. So, the question is very intelligent. I have thought of that also sometimes. But you have to see the psychology of Sri Ramakrishna. It's like he traces it back again. He experiences the path, the new path, from the beginning till that end again. Now, what Shiva said is right. Because he has already realized it, it's pretty easy for him to realize in this path also, and in the next one, and the next one also. But also, because he completes the journey in each path, he sees how this path also can lead to that. That's what.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Please tell us your name.
My name is Ramesh Kotwal,
Ji.
and I am from Asansol, Bengal.
Right.
And question I asked when I was a kid, we had some neighbors called Mukherjees. They said, we have become Brahmos now. Is Brahmos is a cult, or is it still existing in India, or is it only in Bengal? It's a very confusing, kind of a undefined entity for me. Could you?
Yes, you find it all over the Kathamrita, the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. It's 19th century Bengal Renaissance history, you know. So there were a number of reform movements within Hinduism. Arya Samaj in Punjab, the Brahma Samaj, the Prarthana Samaj. We all read this in class 8 history in our school. So Brahma Samaj was one of them. Many eminent Bengalis, they converted to that Brahma Samaj. It was like a refined form of Hinduism. You do away with image worship, and under the impact of Christianity, modern knowledge, do away with image worship, turn to a kind of Vedantic monotheism, not Advaita, not non-dualism, but Vedantic monotheism. Yeah. So it's still there. For example, Rabindranath Tagore was a Brahmo. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Pranam Maharaj, I'm Subhash. This harmony of religions is excellent, but how do you deal with people who are really intolerant and resort to violence? You mentioned in your talk that ultimate thing in one of the books that you mentioned, that you have to address and serve with violence if nothing else works. Would you recommend?
So that's the thing, you know, that's the question, the paradox of tolerance. Suppose somebody says, I'm not at all going to listen to your harmony of religions. I'm not even going to listen to you. I'll just cut off your head. Yeah. If somebody does that, what will you do? So the only way out is to control them through the forces of law and order, or through military force, or whatever it is. And remember, this is also just a part of any religion. They might be fanatical. But as Sri Ramakrishna said, every religion, the core idea is God realization. Core idea is never violence or politics. So essentially, the religions are paths towards God realization. One thing Sri Ramakrishna called Motuar Buddhi in Bengali, which means dogmatism. He disliked that intensely. So don't insist that your path is the only path. One thing I've noticed also is that in all different religions, Christianity, Islam, for example, there are people who respond very well to these teachings. And especially if you come to this country and look at the wide range of Christian churches. Some of them are very liberal. What we are talking about, they accepted long ago. So you look at the Universalists, the Unitarians. When Vivekananda came to this country, many Christian churches did not at all like that he was teaching Hinduism here in a Christian country. On the other hand, there were Christian churches like the Unitarians, Universalists, who opened up the churches to him and allowed him to come and teach from their church at that time. my feeling is, as we go on talking about this, and that's why I say insisting upon this, not be shy about it, the more reasonable, right-thinking people, they are already coming over to this. I have often seen narrow, exclusivist preachers, teachers. They, in the public forum, they have to talk about acceptance, tolerance. They may be a little narrow and intolerant in their own congregation. In the public forum, they have to come and talk, because that means it's narrowness, exclusivity is no longer, at least it's no longer politically acceptable. It's not what is called PC, politically correct. People will look down upon a person who preaches hatred and dislike of others. So that's a big step forward.
Yeah.
That's an advancement from the World Parliament of Religions when Vivekananda spoke, 1893, till today. So have we regressed or gone forward? We have gone forward. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the last two questions, because we have run out of time.
Yeah. Namaste, Swamiji. My name is Ganesh. So my question is, like, in many of the scriptures, we read that when somebody goes in samadhi, they hear that anahad nad,
Yes.
which is like a pranava. So I always wondered then, why not the Sufi saint or Christianity saint, if they reach the same stage, if it is a final, then they should be also hearing the same pranava and om. But then why there is still so much of a difference? And
Yes.
second part is what Sri Ramakrishna saw. Isn't there is anybody parallel in Sufism or Christianity who probably did the same thing and agreed with what Sri Ramakrishna is saying?
Right. Two good questions. One is, why don't they have the same mystical experience? One reason might be the mountain of sugar, that you have such vast, the ultimate reality is infinite. Another reason is, whenever a mystic reaches a kind of mystical height, has those mystical experiences, still the mind of that mystic is conditioned by the path through which he goes, his cultural background, his religious background, his or her religious background. So they tend to interpret what they see, which is beyond language. When they put it in language, they interpret it as that. Now, I am not an expert in Sufi or even Christian mysticism, but I do believe similar experiences are there. Then the second one is that aren't there others who have had such who have done such experiments? To my knowledge, no. At least not in this dramatic and exhaustive way which Sri Ramakrishna has done, in a very deliberate way which Sri Ramakrishna has done. There are very liberal teachings in all the world religions, in every religion. So that means such thoughts were there in the masters and the teachers and the founders of these religions. You to your faith, I to mine, or God has sent prophets to all the people of the world. And so such teachings are there in Islam, in Christianity, in every religion. But this way of actually going out and specifically practicing that religion and taking it to the ultimate goal of all religion, that I think is unique in the history of mysticism, unique to Sri Ramakrishna.
I'm Siva Prasad Raichaudhuri. So I don't have a question. This is a query that for 1,000 years the Hindus and the Buddhists debated. So are these debates are written, and are they written in the debate form?
Yes, you will find them in the texts, the commentaries and sub-commentaries of the Indian philosophy books. For example, Nyaya Sutra. There are commentary, sub-commentary and sub-sub-commentary. And often they are in the form of what is called Purva Paksha and Siddhanta. So there is an opponent who comes forward and asks questions and attacks your position, and you reply. Then that reply is again attacked. And by the position taken by the opponent, you know whether the opponent is a Buddhist idealist, or a Buddhist, nihilist. Nihilist is not the right word. The Shunyavadi, the emptiness school. Or are they coming from another Hindu school, like the Purva Mimamsa, or whatever, some other school? The same thing you see in Vedanta also. So these debates are incorporated within the texts themselves. The question-answer format, Purva Paksha and Siddhanta format. If you look at Brahma Sutra and Shankaracharya's Brahma Sutra Bhashya, so many philosophical viewpoints are there. It's being attacked from various directions, and then answers to them. And the answers are not final answers, because when you give an answer, that is again attacked. And so what happens in this way is you get to refine your thought. So this is, you can find it in the entire body of the Indian philosophical corpus and different schools. Thank you so much. On that note, we'll end. Thank you.